I was 10 years old when I was tied with electric wire for breaking a cup. The cord was stiff-old, probably from the shed, and it left spiral marks around my wrists that turned purple before dinner. I didn't cry then. Crying made it worse. My uncle said I was lucky he didn't use his belt, the one with the square metal buckle that once split my lip when I was too slow bringing him a beer. That night I sat on the cold kitchen floor, my legs bent awkwardly beneath me, while he and my mother smoked on the porch. My hands tingled, but I stayed quiet. If I moved, the wire tightened. My cousin walked past me on the way to the fridge and stepped over me like I was a mop someone forgot to put away. I tried not to breathe loud. I counted the seconds between his footsteps between the porch door swinging open and slamming shut between my pulse thudding in my ears. At one point I looked down and saw a single drop of blood drip from my wrist onto the linoleum. It spread slowly, a red sun blooming in fake marble. That night I didn't sleep. I couldn't. My mother came in after midnight, saw the wire still wrapped around me, and said, "You should have been more careful with that cup." It was part of a set. She went to bed. I stayed there until the sun came up, then I peeled the wire off myself with my teeth. I'm 28 now. I own a voice that carries across states. They hear me every night at 9 p.m., the quiet girl from nowhere telling stories that sound like fiction. But every story I tell is true. I remember the first feeling that no one believed me. It wasn't the wire, or the slap, or even the time he made me kneel on dry rice for hours until my knees bled through my Sunday dress. It was before that. It was soft, quiet. I was 9. He'd come into my room while I was coloring. I was working on a drawing of a horse, badly, the legs too long, when he sat beside me on the bed. His hand rested on my thigh like it belonged there. I didn't understand yet, but something in my stomach twisted like a knot being pulled tighter. He called it a game. He said I shouldn't tell anyone or the game would end and I'd be in trouble. That was the first time I lied to my mother when she asked why I looked pale at breakfast. I told her I had a stomach ache. She handed me antacid tablets and said, "Well, don't be dramatic. Eat toast." After the third or fourth game, I did try to tell. I chose my cousin. I thought maybe because she was only a few years older, she would believe me. I whispered it to her in the hallway by the linen closet. She wrinkled her nose and said, "Uncle Dave's just being nice to you. Don't make stuff up." I stood there, my mouth half open, and something inside me fell and broke. Not like a cup, more like a window shutting. I went back to my room and tore up the drawing. I pressed my face into the pillow and screamed until I choked, and still nobody heard. That night I moved the shoebox under my bed. Inside it was the old tape recorder I found in the basement. It didn't work yet, the batteries were dead, but I stared at it for a long time like it could save me, like it could hear what no one else would. I think that's when I stopped talking, really. Not all at once, just slowly, like a candle running out of wax. They said I was shy, that I preferred silence. I didn't prefer it. I just didn't see the point of making noise in a house that only echoed back lies. The whole neighborhood thought I was a lucky kid. They didn't live in my house. From the outside, it looked almost picturesque. A 2-story clapboard house with hanging flower baskets in summer, a yellow porch swing, and a white mailbox shaped like a barn. My mother baked pies for church events. My uncle fixed cars in the driveway and waved at every passing neighbor. We even had a dog named Skip, though he ran away 3 times and nobody ever went looking. Inside, the air was always heavy. Even in spring, it smelled like damp wood and old anger. My mother's laughter never reached her eyes. She spoke in clipped, pleasant sentences to strangers and razor blade whispers to me. She didn't hit, that was Uncle Dave's job. She enabled, dismissed, looked the other way. She called herself a single mother doing her best. But I knew better. Her silence bought comfort. He paid the bills. We played happy family for the world and something darker in private. There were 4 of us in the house, me, Mom, Uncle Dave, and his son Tyler. Tyler was only a year older than me, but he copied everything his father did. The smirk, the way he'd block doorways just to make me ask permission to pass. He never touched me, but he knew. I could see it in the way he looked at me when I flinched. At school, my teachers described me as well-mannered and quiet. I got good grades, ate lunch alone, I never invited anyone over, and no one ever asked why. The worst part wasn't the bruises or the words, it was the knowing. The way my mother wouldn't meet my eyes when I walked out of a room Uncle Dave had just left. The way she told me to not provoke him. The way she told herself I was overreacting. I became a shadow in my own life. That year, I learned to read faces faster than books. I memorized footstep patterns. I could tell if it would be a good night or a bad one just by the way the screen door slammed. Every time someone called us a sweet little family, I wanted to scream. But I never did. I only nodded and smiled and twisted my fingers behind my back, leaving crescent-shaped marks in my palms. They thought I was lucky. They didn't know the walls of that house remembered every scream I swallowed. I lived by animal instinct, not human. By 11, I could hear him coming before the doorknob turned. The way his boots hit the hallway floor, the pause outside my door, the shallow breath he took when he reached for the knob. My body learned before my brain did how to freeze, how to shrink into the corner where his eyes didn't always look first. I slept with my clothes on, even in summer. I hid the tape recorder under my bed next to a stack of cassettes I stole from the church donation box. I didn't even know what I wanted to catch, only that if I could catch it, if I could make someone hear it, maybe it would mean I wasn't insane. He liked to hurt when he was drunk, and he was drunk most nights. Sometimes it was his hands, sometimes it was the handle of his belt, sometimes it was just words, but those dug deeper than anything else. He'd lean in close smell of sweat and gasoline and say, "You're nothing. You'll always be nothing. You're lucky I even look at you." I believed him. I stopped running to my mother. I stopped asking for help. The last time I did, she shoved the laundry basket into my arms and hissed, "Don't start with your stories again. You know how he gets when he's stressed." So I adapted. I kept my hair combed, my face clean, my mouth shut. I practiced smiling in the mirror until it looked real. I timed my showers so I wouldn't bump into him in the hallway. I ate quietly, cleaned obsessively, and kept the radio on just loud enough to drown out the noise from his room. Tyler once caught me recording my own voice practicing, saying, "Stop, don't." He laughed so hard he nearly fell over and told his dad. That night the tape recorder disappeared. I found it a week later in the trash, shattered. But I fixed it. It took duct tape and a screwdriver I stole from the garage and more courage than I thought I had. But I fixed it, and I kept recording. Not every night. Just the ones when I knew it would be bad. When the light in his eyes went glassy and distant. I recorded silence mostly. The sound of a zipper, a thud, my own breath small and sharp and terrified. I didn't know what I'd do with those tapes. I just knew I needed proof even if no one else ever heard it. Because I was starting to forget what my voice sounded like when I said no. I thought I was dead, and I was relieved. It was winter. Snow had sealed the doors shut, and the windows wore frost like a second skin. I was 14, and I remember the cold more than the pain. The way it bit into my skin after he dragged me out to the shed in just my t-shirt and jeans. I had forgotten to lock the back door. That was my crime that day. He told me I needed to be taught. The shed smelled like oil and rust and old animal traps. He slammed the door behind us, then punched the wall beside my head hard enough to make the tools rattle. I didn't scream. I had learned better. He grabbed me by the hair, slammed me onto the dirt floor, and pressed his boot into my ribs until I couldn't breathe. I don't remember how long it lasted, just that when he left, I didn't move. I laid there with one eye swollen shut and a crack in my side that felt like something had shifted permanently. My fingernails were filled with dirt. My lip was bleeding into the soil. I watched the little lines ants had carved into the wood near the floorboards and thought, "Gee, this is how I go." And I was okay with that, because dying seemed quieter than living, but my body didn't let me. I woke up hours later, numb and shaking, and crawled back to the house on elbows and knees. No one was looking for me. No one opened the door. I crawled through the dog door. He laughed when he saw me, called me filthy, and threw a towel at my face. I went to school the next day with a busted face and said I fell off the hayloft. The nurse nodded, handed me an ice pack, and marked it down as an accident. That night, I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize myself. My left eye was red and wide, and the skin around it was yellow-green. My mouth was split. My ribs clicked when I moved. But it was the look in my eyes that scared me most. Not fear, not sadness, nothing. Just stillness. Like I'd stepped out of my body and left the lights on. I opened the drawer, pulled out a tape, and hit record. I held it close to my mouth and whispered, "One day they'll know. One day this will be more than a story I survived." But part of me didn't believe it. Part of me thought I'd never make it out alive. I disappeared at 3 a.m. They didn't notice until afternoon. It was the first real snow of the season. Thick, soft, the kind that muffles the world and makes everything feel far away. I waited until the house was asleep. I knew their patterns by then. Uncle Dave snored like a saw, drunk and dead to the world. My mother took sleeping pills 1.5 every night with a cup of milk. Tyler had moved out 2 months before, off to college on a scholarship that my uncle claimed credit for. I packed one bag, just enough. A sweater, the jeans with no holes, the $23 I'd been hiding in the lining of my pillow, and the box, the tape recorder, the tapes, wrapped in a towel like a newborn. I didn't look back. I didn't write a note. There was no dramatic goodbye, no screaming match, no midnight confrontation, just silence. The same silence they'd fed me all my life. I gave it back to them as a final gift. The bus station was 20 miles away. I walked the first 5. I wore 2 pairs of socks and no gloves. My fingers burned from the cold, and my ribs still hurt when I breathed too deep, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. At the gas station on Route 17, I slipped into the restroom and changed clothes, brushed my hair, washed my face with freezing water. I looked like any other girl, maybe tired, maybe a little scared. But no one looked twice. I caught the 4:30 Greyhound out of town, paid in cash. The driver didn't ask questions. I sat in the very back, pressed my forehead to the window, and watched the town vanish behind me like it had never been real. The freedom didn't feel like I thought it would. It wasn't fireworks or crying. It was a dull ache, a low hum under my skin, like waiting for a scream that never came. I slept a little, dreamless. By the time the sun rose, I was 5 counties away. I knew they'd notice eventually, that my bed would be empty, that the kitchen would feel too quiet, that no one would take out the trash or clean the ashtray or flinch when a door slammed. But they wouldn't worry. They'd wait a day, maybe 2. Then my mother would say she was always dramatic, and Uncle Dave would shrug and open a beer. I imagined them standing in my room, not even realizing what they'd lost. And for the first time, I smiled, not because I was free, but because they would never hear my voice again, not the way they used to. I have a degree, a house, a reputation, but every night I dream about ropes. The nightmares don't come every night, but when they do, I wake soaked in sweat, my fists clenched so tight, my nails dig crescent moons into my palms. In the dreams, I'm always back in that house. The hallways stretch too long, the lights flicker, his voice follows me, never angry, calm, casual, like he's asking for coffee while dragging a belt behind him. I scream in the dream, but no sound comes out. My throat is stuffed with cotton or dirt or silence. In real life, I don't scream. I just sit up in bed and breathe, one hand pressed to my sternum like I'm holding something broken together. My bedroom now is spacious, clean with thick curtains and locks on every door. The floors don't creak, the walls don't hold secrets. And still, I sleep with the tape recorder beside me, not to record anymore, but to remind me that it was real, that I wasn't crazy. I finished college, communications major. Ironic, I guess. A girl who didn't speak for nearly a decade now speaks for a living. My voice isn't loud, but it's steady. I host a late-night radio show, The Midnight Fold. People say it calms them, that I have a voice that feels like safety. They don't know what it cost. I don't do interviews. I don't do photos. I don't talk about my past. My listeners think I'm mysterious. Private, they call me. Some guess I've lost someone. Others think I'm just artistic. No one ever guesses that I was buried alive in my own life and clawed out using stories and sound. During the day, I write small essays, observations, quiet, haunting things that make people feel seen. But I'm always alone. I don't date. I don't entertain visitors. I don't go home for holidays. The few friends I have stopped asking a long time ago. I tell them I'm just better on my own. But the truth is, I don't trust the quiet in others anymore. Only in me. The therapists call it PTSD. They give it names and acronyms and recommend grounding exercises. I nod. I do what they say, but nothing really grounds me the way the tapes do. Sometimes I listen to them. I sit in the dark with headphones and let my younger self bleed through static. The tiny gasps, the footsteps, the sounds that meant survival. It hurts like hell, but it reminds me I wasn't imagining it. It happened, and I lived. Now I speak not because I'm healed, but because I refuse to let silence win. I smile, but inside I count every time they hit me. I went back without warning. No letters, no calls, no Facebook announcements. Just me, 28 successful, polished, stepping off a rental car in front of the same rotting porch that once scraped my knees when I fell running from him. They didn't recognize me at first. Not really. My hair was darker, my skin clearer, my shoulders straighter. I wore lipstick now, confidence, and a winter coat that cost more than their monthly groceries. My uncle opened the door with a beer in hand and a slight limp I didn't remember. He squinted. "Can I help you?" I smiled. The same one I wore when I scrubbed his blood from my own pillowcase. "Hi, Uncle Dave." He froze. The beer bottle hung mid-air. My mother appeared behind him, her mouth slightly open. Her hair was thinner now. Her face sagged in the places mine had sharpened. They didn't say welcome, just stepped aside. The house smelled the same. Damp wood and dust and moldy forgiveness. I walked through it like a museum. Every room a scene of the crime. My old room was a storage closet now. A broken vacuum sat where my bed used to be. I was in the area I lied, thought I'd say hello. They made coffee, stiff hands. My mother asked about my job and I told her just enough. She asked about kids, marriage. I shook my head, smiled tight and said, "I talk to a lot of people. That's enough for me." No one mentioned the past. Not the bruises, not the tapes, not the nights I didn't eat, not the day I vanished. I could see it in their eyes, a flicker of discomfort, maybe even fear, but no guilt, just confusion, like they'd hoped the years would make me forget. They didn't know I'd written every moment into my bones, that I'd built a life from ashes and named every success after a scar. When my uncle asked if I wanted to stay for dinner, I laughed. Not politely. Full. Cruel. "No," I said. "I've had enough from this place." I left them standing on the porch blinking into the wind like they'd seen a ghost. But I wasn't a ghost. I was the reckoning they never expected to walk in heels. I don't need to scream. They just need to be afraid of my eyes. The first episode aired on a Thursday. No names, just a story, a voice, my voice. Low, calm, measured. I started with the wire, with the way it dug into my skin. I described the cold linoleum, the blood drop, the sound of laughter from the porch. I didn't cry. I didn't falter. I told it like reading the news. That night our phone lines exploded. Listeners called in, some sobbing, some silent, some just breathing. And then I played a clip. A scratchy, low-quality recording. The static bled into the background, but you could still hear it, the muffled struggle, the harsh voice, the sound of skin meeting skin. My breath sharp and strangled. I said, "This is not fiction." I never said his name. I didn't have to. In towns like ours, silence is a rumor waiting to be confirmed. Whispers traveled faster than radio waves. Each week another tape. Each week a story. Each week a little more truth dressed in calm rage. Listeners began to connect the dots. A man with a limp, a girl who disappeared, a family who never searched. My inbox flooded. "I know who this is. I remember. I'm so sorry." Sorry means nothing to me now. But fear that I understand. Uncle Dave stopped showing up in public. I heard he closed his garage. My mother called once from a blocked number. She didn't speak, just breathed into the phone. I waited, then I said, "You're not the victim here," and hung up. The final episode was live. I was never going to forgive them, I said. Forgiveness is something you earn. They earned nothing. I gave them silence for 18 years. Now I take it back. I played the tape of myself at 14 whispering into the recorder. One day they'll know. Then I said, "Now you do." I signed off, closed the mic, sat in the studio, the red light off, and watched the snow begin to fall again through the glass. Outside, they were choking on the truth. Inside, I had never felt more still. Not empty. Just finished. I don't need anyone to admit their mistakes. I just need them to live like I used to live, with shame clinging to their necks like sweat, with eyes scanning every room for a blow that doesn't come, with silence louder than screams. I don't wonder if they've heard the episodes. I know they have. The town is too small. The guilt too thick. Even strangers started calling them out in grocery stores, online forums, in whispers that trail like smoke. My uncle hasn't left his house in months. My mother avoids eye contact with cashiers. They live now in the world they made for me, fear-fed, uncertain, hunted by memory. I didn't take them to court. I didn't post pictures. I didn't shout names from rooftops. I simply told the truth, and the truth did the rest. People think revenge is fire, loud, violent, bloody. But real revenge is slow, measured, clinical. It's walking into the house that nearly killed you with your chin high and your voice steady. It's watching the ones who thought you'd be broken forever realize you grew stronger in the shadows they built. It's becoming everything they said you'd never be, not to prove them wrong, but to prove you were always right. The last time I visited the town, I didn't stop at their house. I parked outside the school, the same one where I sat silent for years, learning how to speak without sound. I watched the kids pour out backpacks, bouncing voices bright. No one looked twice at me, just another woman behind tinted glass, another ghost passing through. But I wasn't a ghost anymore. I was the echo of everything they tried to bury. And I was done. Not healed, not whole, but no longer theirs. They don't know where I live, what city, what name I use now on paper. But sometimes I like to think they listen. Late at night, lights off, door locked, my voice pouring through the speakers like smoke under a door. A story, a confession, a sentence, and I hope in those moments they flinch, not from fear of what I'll say next, but from knowing I haven't even started. The rest of my life is mine, and I owe them nothing.